Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we give you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state. We talk about all things vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. Thank you for listening. We really hope that the show is something you look forward to checking in with every week. Episodes drop every weekend on Apple Podcasts to get you ready for working in the yard on the weekend. So make sure you subscribe. All you need to do is open the podcast app on your Apple iPhone and look for Gardening Utah, and you can just hit that subscribe button, and every time we drop a new episode, you'll be able to have a listen. Now, if you don't have an Apple iPhone, you can still listen to our episodes. You can listen on 860 KKAT AM on Saturday and Sunday in Utah, which you may be listening to right now. And you can also listen to past episodes on 860kkat.com/garden. So my hope is this is a fun and informative show that you can listen to while you're out and about, kind of getting to work in the garden, or maybe you're shopping in the nurseries or garden centers, so you can be inspired and stay in the know on all the tasks you need to accomplish. But first, it's the tip of the week.
860 KKAT with your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is, here's what to do with all those leftover pumpkins that are still sitting out on your front porch. So Thanksgiving is over, and if you're like me, you have a front porch loaded with pumpkins. And many of mine came from my garden. Some did, some didn't. Now, I did do a really fun montage on my front porch of all the different pumpkins and created this cool sort of fall porch. And so I'm going to post that on the Gardening Utah Instagram page. So just look us up at Gardening Utah on Instagram. That's our handle. And you can have a look at what I did. Maybe it'll inspire you. But there are so many things you can do with your pumpkins. Now, the large pumpkins, you really don't want to be making like a pumpkin puree or a pumpkin soup or cooking with those. You can totally eat the seeds. They're delicious. And you can also save the seeds to grow next year if you choose. So most often, if they're not like cross-pollinated, the pumpkins you can save that seed and grow pumpkins next year with it if you so choose. Another thing that I like to do with my pumpkins sometimes, I will just chop it up and make an all-purpose like vegetable stock. So maybe I'll add onions, mushroom is delicious in stock, celery, parsley, anything else from the garden that you have that you just want to make a flavor out of. I mean, I just will chunk it up and just get the flavor out of it, and then discard it, add it to the compost, once you've made your stock. So that's another thing that I like to do with the large pumpkins that are just too stringy and coarse to make something out of. Now, pumpkins are one of my favorite things to cook with, especially this time of year. The smaller pie-type pumpkins are definitely the ones that you want to be cooking with, or the other like delicious winter squash like butternut or the delicata or anything else that you've grown or that you can find in the farmer's market right now. But pumpkin has so many uses, and the smaller ones, obviously you can still eat the seeds there, but you can also make delicious pumpkin puree. I mean, not only does the pumpkin itself store for so long, sometimes I have some going into January, February, if you leave it in a cool, dry place, like in your garage or a cellar, it will last quite some time, especially if it's cured and stored properly. But I love to, when it gets close to where I'm like, I probably should take care of this. If I am not making anything immediately, I will either chunk it up into, just regular diced size pieces, and I'll set it out on a cookie tray and then freeze it individually so that once it's frozen, I will scoop up all those pieces into a bag, take as much of the air out as I can, and then they don't stick together and they last longer that way. And then whenever you're ready to make like a pumpkin soup, if you want to keep those chunks there, you can just add those right into your soup. Or you can I do this a lot, I will cut the pumpkin in half, scoop out the seeds, save the seeds, of course, and then add them cut side down onto a cookie tray with a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper, and some water. roast those in the oven until they are really soft, and then scrape out the flesh away from the skin and make a pumpkin puree. Put it right in the blender, blend it right up, and then freeze it if I'm not going to use it straight away. But I really love to make pumpkin soup. And that was the tip of the week.
Never miss a tip for your garden. Never miss a tip for your garden. And never miss an episode. The Gardening Utah Podcast with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Well, speaking of pumpkins, I hope that everybody had an absolutely fantastic Thanksgiving. You're probably listening to this over the weekend after Thanksgiving, so perfect time to get out there on that front porch, put all those pumpkins away, do something fun with them like I mentioned, and I know I'll be doing the same, and I'm probably, as you're listening to this show, I bet you that I am decorating my front porch for Christmas. So I'm excited to do that this year. One of the tips I wanted to give you, that's not really a tip of the week, but this is something I love to do that's like my secret, super, super inexpensive front porch holiday decoration, okay? So I take 2 of my larger garden pots. You know, they've got to match. It's got to be symmetrical. So get 2 of your largest garden pots, and you leave the soil in them. Just, cut down the plant material. Get 2 tomato cages, okay? Put the tomato cages upside down, so topside down on the soil. And then you're going to want to just secure those somehow. Maybe it's with, I don't know. I forget what I even used in the past. But like those like metal wiring that you can just shove into the dirt and just to hold those tomato cages into the soil. Sometimes I just dig it kind of in there, kind of shimmy it down there. It just depends on if it gets wind or not. Where I put mine, it doesn't get wind. So stay with me here. Then, when you get your Christmas tree, I get so excited about this. When you get your Christmas tree, if you have to cut off the bottom and you're needing to take off some branches, save those. And then when you're at the Christmas tree lot, look around, snoop around just a little bit, look around on the ground and see if you can find any spare branches, which is what I do, or just buy a bundle. They're usually $8. I always get mine at Garden Spot out on Redwood Road in like 48 South. And they sell Christmas trees this time of year, and I'll just go out and I'll ask them for a couple boughs that they do cut off the bottoms of the Christmas tree. And then you kind of maneuver those. You kind of cut them up just a little bit to the shapes you want. And you basically you shimmy those into the tomato cages, and it's a triangle. Are you going with me? And you kind of create this little mini mock Christmas tree, and you fiddle with it. It takes just a little bit, but not long. And it ends up covering the tomato wire, and it looks like a tree. It looks like a pine tree. And then I put Christmas lights around them and plug them into, the outlet, and off you go. There you go. There is your amazing front porch, very inexpensive, upcycled, recycled Christmas decoration. You are welcome. And if you go to our Instagram page at Gardening Utah, you'll be able to see exactly what mine look like. I will post those there this weekend because I'm going to be doing that this very weekend. Okay. So when we come up after this break, we're going to be talking with Cameron Alcott with Progressive Plants in this next segment. We're going to be going over fall trees that you can buy now and even plant now that will give you amazing color in the fall. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and I've got Cameron here with me from progressiveplants.com. We've had so many questions lately of people saying, hey, all those beautiful trees up in the canyons, how do I duplicate that in my yard? And what are the best trees for fall color? And you're just always the perfect expert to have to really go over this stuff and really help people understand. I mean, not only are you the guy that knows all the right plants for the right time of season, but you're also the one that has it available for us, right?
Oh, stop it, Jana. No, I know. We have been seeing a lot of questions about fall color and how to duplicate it in the yard. And I think that when you drive up the canyons and you see all these pictures of like the Northeast, like in Maine, back New York and places like that, where all the fall colors are just looking so good right now. And the funny thing is, like, it seems like we're a little behind here because it's been so warm lately. Historically, we're usually starting about now, but even at the nursery, I'm not seeing a ton, which is awesome because, if you go and you plant stuff right now, then you're going to be able to enjoy it for the next like 3 or 4 weeks or so as things really start to change.
A lot of those trees that grow so well up in the mountains may not do as well in some of the valley areas, depending on the heat and that kind of thing. What are some of your favorite tried and trues?
I'm really glad that you brought that up because the one tree that I get asked for the most is the Rocky Mountain maple. Its Latin name is Acer granidentatum. It's the orange tree that you see up in the mountains everywhere in the fall. You just see the little pockets of orange, and otherwise they're you don't really notice them when you're up there hiking and stuff like that during the summer. And then fall hits, and they are just amazing up there. And I really love that tree. We actually have some here planted at the nursery. And the one thing I will say about that particular tree is that I feel it's probably going to perform better up in the mountains than it is down here in the valleys. I mean, it does grow here in the valleys. It does okay. But it really likes to be happy, up in the upper elevations, like above 6,000 feet. It seems like down here in the valleys a lot of times, and especially like here at my nursery too, like when the fall color starts to shift, it's not that vibrant as it is up in the mountains. Because I think we just get too hot down here in the valleys that I think just kind of get stressed. You get some burn on the leaves and the color just doesn't look all that good. But man, it is a gorgeous, gorgeous tree. So, but I get asked for that one a lot. We do sell it, but I just want to, kind of temper people's feelings on that tree. Like it's not going to perform the same way at your house that it's going to, as it is if you go up to one of the ski resorts like at Snowbird or Brighton or something like that. So, but there's a lot of trees that I think have great color. There's a lot of different maples that are out there that actually do pretty well in our soils that give you some vibrant color. One of my favorites actually are Sensation box elders. And you hear the word box elder and you kind of freak out. Like I just saw your face just now.
I kind of was like, okay, wait, yeah. It kind of gives you that moment of pause.
Exactly. But the Sensation box elder. Now this is very important. You have to get the cultivar that says Sensation. Okay. I'd be surprised if regular box elders were in cultivation. So I bet most of them that you get at the garden centers are going to say Sensation on them. So it's Acer negundo Sensation. Now that particular tree it's a male, okay, and it's a clone. Because it's a male tree, it does not produce any seeds. So you don't get any little helicopter whirlybirds or anything like that.
Ooh.
And what most people don't know, because when you think box elder tree, what else do you think of?
Bugs.
Yeah, the box elder bugs.
Yeah.
Those things are horrendous.
Yes, they are.
But box elder bugs feed on like the flowers and the seeds of the female box elder tree.
Okay.
You see where I'm going with this?
I
so
do.
If you have Sensation, it is a male and is a clone and there is no seeds, which also means there are no box elder bugs.
And it also means there's no helicopter whirlybirds or whatever you call them.
There's no Samaras is what they're called.
Oh, so there's an actual scientific name. Got it.
There is an actual scientific term for them. So.
Of course.
Of course. Now, here's the thing. This is the other interesting thing about the box elder tree is that, because I'm just going to pop off random, facts about trees because that's what I do.
I love it.
So the box elder tree is actually really versatile. It will grow in any type of soil condition. So if you live in Saratoga Springs, Eagle Mountain, like out in Tooele, poor soils, clay soils, sandy soils, wet soils, dry soils, that tree will literally grow anywhere.
Okay.
So it's a good shade tree. It grows very, very quickly. It has brilliant, like orange red fall color. It is a gorgeous tree. And I don't think it's used enough in the landscapes. It does get big, so if you have a small lot, this is not going to be the tree for you. But I think it's a tree that is very underused and should probably be used a little bit more. I just think, the public kind of is turned against it because of the term box elder, and then they think box elder bugs, but it's a great tree. So a couple of other maples that you can try. There's the paper bark maple. That actually has some pretty interesting, like orangey red fall color. Ooh. And the one thing that I like about the paper bark maple is that it has exfoliating bark. And the bark itself is more of like an orange, rusty brown color as it, with all that, the exfoliation where all the bark kind of peels away, it gives you some winter interest as well.
Oh, yes, of course.
Sometimes performance on those depends on where you live. Sometimes they do better in different parts of, Utah than others. So you have to be a little bit careful for that. If you like the traditional like Norway maple look, there's been a new series that have kind of come out that we're excited about. It's basically a cross between two maples. It's the Acer truncatum, which is a Shantung maple, and the Acer platanoides, which is a Norway maple. They've merged the two together because, plant people can be Frankensteins, I guess. So they give you that Norway maple look, but the range in fall colors is incredible. I mean, you can get like Norwegian and Pacific sunset. They're kind of like a yellowy orange. A couple years ago, they launched the urban sunset, which is like a brilliant scarlet color on a maple. So if you want to get that really bright scarlet type color, you don't think you can use like a big tooth maple, like the native one that grows here. The urban sunset might be the one for you. And then there's a couple of other, truncated platanoides crosses that exist. So it's basically like pick your fall color, and that's the tree that you get. So
yeah.
And then one of my other favorites, and this is one that's not really used a lot. I'm going to give you the Latin name because that's how we work. It's an Acer japonicum aconitafolium, and it's usually referred to as a full maple. It's got these huge green, like palmate type leaves, and its fall color is a brilliant scarlet. And it's gorgeous. It's actually related to the Japanese maples. So it will grow in the shade. So it makes it kind of a really cool, like understory type tree. And we've also noticed that it actually tolerates a fair amount of sun too. And it's probably hardier than most other Japanese maples. So I think I have like one left in stock at the time that we are recording this. So that might change by the time that it airs.
Forget this whole segment, everybody, because it's coming to my house.
Probably. So, but I mean, those are like my favorite maples to use because you can get, they work for like big shade trees, and then a little bit like smaller shady areas, like, with the full moon maple that we just talked about. And then of course, I mean, their fall color is second to none. I mean, they are absolutely incredible.
And as you're talking about these trees, I'm imagining the grouping and the different contrasting colors that they're all differently setting off. I mean, it sounds just delightful.
Yeah, it's like, well, you've seen the pictures of like, the overlays of like, Maine and the Northeast and maybe a little bit in the Pacific Northwest and stuff. I mean, you can make your house look like that. It's not difficult. You just have to have the right plants, So we're going to go through a whole list of plants today that will give you that type of color. So,
yeah. So will you repeat the name of that maple really quick that you just mentioned, because the internet cut out just a little bit?
The Acer japonicum aconitafolium, also known as the full moon maple.
A full moon maple. Okay, that's what we missed. All right, got it.
Yeah. So, so I would say check out those maples because I mean they actually do pretty well here, and I think they're absolutely gorgeous. I mean they're good solid trees. Another one that's been kind of gaining in popularity that I've noticed, especially with landscape architects, because I think this tree has a really interesting structure. Is the Autumn Brilliance serviceberry tree. Now its fall color is like just a beautiful scarlet, like orangey scarlet color. I mean, that's why people get this tree is for the fall color. It also does have white flowers in the spring. So it's, it kind of gives you, 2 seasons worth of interest. But it is a gorgeous, gorgeous tree. It's very, very small. In Utah, it's only going to get probably around like 15 to 20 feet tall and wide. So not huge, great for smaller lots. Not really a densely leafed tree. It'll give you like a little bit more dappled shade underneath it. It has a really good shape to it, I think. And a couple of other ones that aren't used a whole lot. Hackberries, I think, are really kind of interesting. They grow pretty fast. They can get pretty big. There's also another one called Prairie Sentinel that's actually columnar. It gets to be about 25 feet and maybe about 6 to 7 feet wide. Its fall color is yellow, but it is a bright, bright yellow. It is absolutely gorgeous. So it rivals, like I would say, like the quaking aspen that you get up in the mountains and stuff. Yes. And this is the last time that I'm going to talk about quaking aspen because I don't want people putting them in their yards for their fall color because you'll pay for it later.
Yep.
But I think hackberries are a really good tree, and they're also one that grow in really poor soils, and so you can grow them pretty much anywhere. Another tree that I think that could get used a little bit more are the Crataegus species, also known as hawthorns. There's a lot of hawthorns that have some really good fall color. Like Washington hawthorn's pretty good. The thornless hawthorns are really good. There's a few that you can really get to that just look absolutely amazing. And they come in all sorts of different sizes, and they also have flowers in the spring. I mean, they're not used enough, I don't think. So they can give you some really good color all year long.
If you're listening to this and you're going, I didn't bring my pad and paper with me, don't worry about it because we're going to put it in the episode notes under this episode at Gardening Utah on Apple Podcasts. So you'll be able to link straight to all of these trees and see more about them without a problem. So stay with us. We'll be right back right here on Gardening Utah.
860 KKAT with Jana Francis and Gardening Utah, where it's always mulch time.
We are supported by ProgressivePlant.com. Visit ProgressivePlant.com today.
She really does have the nicest yard on the block. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and in this segment, we're talking bulbs. We're talking daffodils, tulips, hyacinth, crocus. You know, in the spring when you see those ads for Thanksgiving Point, Tulip Festival, or your downtown Salt Lake, and you see these amazing, amazing tulip displays all around Temple Square, and you say to yourself, you know what? Next year, I'm totally going to be on the ball, and I'm going to plant a whole bunch of bulbs so that I can have something similar in my own yard. Well, now is the time. And if you're like me, starting in August, you start getting those bulb and plant and tree catalogs, and they may have a certain section of your kitchen counter. And when you're sitting down taking a quick break, this is what I do. I just kind of flip through and I earmark all the pages that have bulbs that I love and, circle in the big red ink, all the varieties I want. And then, of course, I narrow down. But now is the time to get these bulbs in the ground. And a lot of people have an assumption in Utah, especially, that you should do this in August. And there's ideal times for everything, but really you don't want to plant your spring bulbs until it gets a little colder. But the misconception is because the retail stores get some of these packets of crocus and daffodils and tulips out a lot earlier, sometimes even end of July, August. And the reason they do that, though, is because they want those sold and out of the way so that they can get their holiday displays up. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the perfect time to plant these in Utah. Now is the time you want to get these in the ground. So if you've already bought that bag and you think, oh, I need to plant those, and you haven't, it's okay. Now's a better time. But you do want to be careful to make sure that those bulbs are fresh. Just because you bought them recently doesn't mean they are. I mean, they could be experiencing rot, mold, but the thing you want, and they can sometimes even dry out. So what you want to be careful of is just to make sure that they're dense, so they're really firm to the touch. And as long as they look like that and there's no mold or rot, you're good to go. And honestly, is there anything better than the beginning of spring when you walk outside and you've gone through this long winter and you haven't seen anything fresh grow around here in so long, and you look out amongst that little layer of snow and you see about 1-inch little green sprouts poking out from the ground, and it just gives you this sense of refresh and just excitement for the upcoming the better weather. And it is just so much fun to see blooms of bulbs coming up in the garden once you've done the work in the fall. So let's talk about the best way to get these bulbs in the ground, because again, it is the perfect time. So there's a few things to remember. First, make sure you're choosing a spot that has at least 6 hours of sunlight. And daffodils are a really early bloomer. So one of the tricks there is sometimes you can plant daffodils around trees that normally have a lot of shade in the summer, but the trees don't have those leaves yet so far early in the spring. So you can plant daffodils in a spot that gets sun before the trees have those leaves in the spring. And by the time the trees start shading all the bulb beds, those early blooming bulbs are done. So that's one great little tip, is you can plant some of these bulbs under some of those deciduous trees that, there is going to get more sun on the base of the ground below those that time of year. Now, bulbs do love soil that is rich in organic matter and compost, and they love well-drained soil. Soggy soil or overwatering will cause them to rot. So when you plant, you really want to make sure that you're not planting them in a spot that gets overwatered, whether it be maybe from a really heavy sprinkling system in that spot. You just want to be careful about rot with your bulbs. And then when you're ready to plant, here's the general rule of thumb. Plant that bulbs 3 times as deep as the bulb is tall. And make sure most often that the pointy part is facing upwards. And you can easily look at the bulb and tell where the roots are and plant them with the roots down. Although I will say that professional planters that plant in mass plantings, like at Tulip Festival or in downtown Salt Lake at the Temple, I've actually watched them plant these, and they kind of spread them out in really mass plantings. And in general, they try to get them face up, but the bulbs can kind of orient themselves. So don't worry about that too much, especially with the smaller ones. Sometimes I like to take a mixture of certain bulbs like anemone, crocus, grape hyacinth, bluebells. You can actually combine those all up. Those are just itty bitty bulbs, and kind of just create more of a mass area, maybe dig a bigger hole, like as far as more round, and just kind of spread them out. And don't worry so much, because they're going to orient themselves. They're smaller bulbs, and you'll be good to go. Okay, so you're going to want to prepare the planting bed well. You don't want to just simply dig a hole with your bulb. I do like to use the bulb diggers. They're very handy. But you don't want to just simply dig the hole and plant the bulb. For the really best growth, you're going to want to make sure you prepare that bed ahead of planting. So you're going to remove weeds, you're going to loosen the soil, and if you can, add compost or nutrients to the soil before you plant. But you're going to want to do it before the ground freezes. Plant when the nightly temperature is around 40 to 50 degrees, which is about now. Okay, so you're also going to want to plant the right bulbs. Remember, the rule of thumb is a plant that blooms in the spring is planted in the fall, or a bulb, I should say. And a bulb that blooms in early summer or later, you want to plant them in the spring, kind of like dahlias and gladiolus. We worry about those in the spring because they bloom in the summer, but we're talking daffodils, tulips, hyacinth, and crocus, and all the ones I just mentioned. As far as the style and how you're going to plant them, most of the time you're going to want to put your bulbs in small clusters. I really like to kind of color coordinate and you want to put the smaller bulbs in the front and the larger bulbs in the back, depending on where you're putting them. But in general, you're going to be planting them individually, but in small clusters all together, maybe circles, or you can line a beautiful row. But once you have the bulbs in the ground, they will stay dormant through the remainder of the fall and winter, so you don't need to bother with fertilizing. Just wait until you do see those first offshoots of spring, which is always such a great day. And that is the indicator that the roots are starting to grow, and it's a good time to get ready to give them some nutrients. So you want to make sure that you don't fertilize after the bulbs start to flower, because this will inhibit the bulb growth. So if you haven't tried bulbs in your garden, you definitely should. With daffodils, hyacinths, tulips, or other great spring bloomers, the bulb beds will give you such beautiful color. And this is always before the rest of your garden starts to grow. So do a little bit of work now and then sit back and wait for spring's spectacular show. Okay, so when we come back, we are going to be talking about some of the lessons we've learned in our 2020 garden and ways that you can make sure to prevent the mistakes that you've made this year going into next year. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. 860 KKAT with more of the fastest growing show on radio. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and let's talk about things that we've learned in 2020. Now, I could talk all afternoon with someone about the things I've learned so far this year, but there's a few things that are really top of mind with me right now. And again, the season's not over. We haven't had our first frost, at least in the Salt Lake City area. There's a couple more weeks to go. As far as when I looked at the weather last, it certainly seemed like we don't really have a freeze in the Salt Lake area for at least the next week or so, but who knows? It's Utah and it's Mother Nature. And it's 2020, so who really knows what's going to happen tomorrow? But that being said, you know, when I look at specifically with my vegetable garden this year, when it was seed starting and seed planting time, when I think back this year when I planted so many seeds, I realized, okay, wait a minute. That was really when the pandemic started. Let's be honest. This is when, you know, the supply chains of everything in the grocery stores and, you know, it was completely messed up. I mean, buying toilet paper and Clorox wipes was like all anybody wanted for a minute there, right? And so as you're a gardener, and I've got, as I'm sure if you've listened to the show, you know that I have quite a bit of planting space in my yard. And I do love to, grow a lot of our own food. It's kind of like a mini little homestead, if you will, in that I rarely, I don't let anything go to waste, and I can freeze, dehydrate, whatever I can do, the garden so that I can be at least putting something on the plate every single day, all year long that we grew from our own garden. And that's just, a thing that I love to do. It's part hobby, it's part competition, it's part challenge and competition with myself. And it's part just, it's something I really enjoy doing. It seems really stressful to a lot of people, but for me, it's kind of relaxing because, I've got a really busy career, and gardening for me is kind of an escape to that. So anyway, that being said, I know if you've listened to the show, you've heard that I have kind of a ridiculous amount of tomato plants, all right? So let's start with the lessons I've learned from my tomatoes this year. All right, now the number is 87. I know, it's crazy. And one of the questions that I did get from someone in I don't have their name up because I don't have my phone with me, but in the Gardening Utah direct messages on Instagram, he had said, I think his name was Matt from Logan, but he said, can you tell me why you have 87 tomato plants? Okay, here's the story. I normally plant between 20 and 30. And for me, for our family, that's still more than enough. But I do a lot of sauce tomatoes. I'm really, really into making real Italian, amazing tomato sauce so that we can have that all year long. I'm very specific about my sauce varieties of tomatoes. That being said, I thought, well, geez, if we're not going to, the supply chain's just completely messed up. I mean, we can't get toilet paper now. What's going to happen in 6 months from now? So of course that sets in with like, okay, well, I've got all these seeds. So I start my planting, okay? And I've got at least 18 different varieties of tomatoes. And of course, some of them, so it started to where it was like, ooh, this seed packet's from, 2005. So I don't know if these are actually going to germinate. So I'll start 3 plants of this particular variety. And then, and I also had my best friend had said, hey, listen, I know you have a lot of great seeds. If it's not a big deal, why don't you plant some extras for me so that I can get them in the ground? Perfect. I mean, I love to do that kind of stuff. So I planted about 10 different plants for them. And they ended up needing to go a different direction because they needed to do some filming at their house, and they needed a garden like overnight. So they ended up buying a bunch of plants so that they could kind of have it for their videography. Anyway, that being said, then that's one reason why I had some spares. As well as, again, I was like, oh, these ones might not germinate. So then I'll start 3 of these. And then you just kind of get into your starting, and it just kind of got out of control. And then I like to, it's kind of a weird thing I do. It's not necessarily recommended. Well, I wouldn't say it's not recommended. It's just something that I do. It's not really in the rule books, but I like to soak my seeds when I start them for, I don't know, anywhere between an hour and, depending on the size of the seed, sometimes even 2 or 3 hours, like for the thicker squash or pumpkin seeds. Just because I just like to know that they're moist, and just gives them a day or two. I feel like it germinates earlier. I have no scientific proof of this whatsoever, but it's just what I do. And so I set out all these teeny little, bowls on my counter, and I put in my seeds. And as I was planting a certain cherry tomato, I normally just put the seeds in the palm of my hand, and then I put however many in the bowl. Well, this time I just got cocky, and I just went to dump just a few, and I dumped way too many. Well, at that point, they're growing. If the seeds touched water, it's going to grow. So you know what I think? I can't waste anything, so that means I have to plant them. And then I have really good intentions, okay? So, you know what? I'll just give these to neighbors. I'll give them to friends, or, whatever. And then it comes time to plant them all, and you wait. Oh, does anybody want any cherry tomato plants, etc.? And it's too late. So that's kind of the reason why I ended up with 87 tomato plants. And now, peak harvest season for tomatoes. Guess how many tomatoes I've picked? Let me tell you, it's a full-time job just picking my tomatoes. Not to mention, the canning is just insane. I'll post a picture of how much tomato sauce I've canned so far on the Gardening Utah Facebook page or Instagram page, because oh boy, it's kind of crazy. And if anybody wants to know how to can tomato sauce, I'm your girl. And if you want me to do a little intro or instruction on that anytime in the show, happy to do it. Just give me a request and say, I want to hear more about that. And I'm happy to do it, because it's top of mind, because I'm doing it all the time. But my kitchen right now looks like an Italian nonni, an Italian grandmother's kitchen. I'm not a grandmother. But anyway, that being said, it's like the tomato sauce production planet. So anyway, that's okay, because I am really, for real, going to have, I figure I'll have enough canning of tomato sauce for about 2 years for my family. So there's that. That's assuming we have a jar of tomatoes at least once a week. And I probably use more than that, to be honest with you. How many times are you doing like a chili, or, maybe sloppy joes, or tomato, pasta sauce? I make a ton of pasta sauce, salsa, you name it. I am the hookup for tomato sauce and really good tomatoes. So one lesson I learned from 2020 is really take notes from year to year on how much your family uses, okay? And, so that being said, one of the good lessons for me this year with having the excess and so many different varieties of tomatoes, that I'm really able to assess, like, how much are we naturally eating and how much do we have excess. Now, granted, I'm not letting anything go to waste, but I also normally don't have this much time to spend this much time canning and processing, because my other plants in my garden are screaming at me. I've got a ton of Anaheims and you name it. But in general, what I've learned this year is about 6 sauce tomatoes for my family of 4, meaning 6 sauce tomato plants, so that I can and have enough for the year. That's probably enough for my family. And 1 or 2 really great slicers. This year I started an Amish Gold for the first time. Loved it. 10 out of 10, would plant again. But I don't need 3 Amish Golds. And I love Big Rainbow, which is a great big heirloom, but I don't need 2. Because, there's only so many tomato sandwiches you can have with a family of 4. The other excuse I'll give for myself, this is kind of my confession, my garden confessions. But is my oldest son and his girlfriend have lived with us for the last 5 years, and he loves to cook as well. Well, they moved to Montana after I started all the seeds. And so I planned on having 2 extra mouths to feed for a full year. So that's another excuse as to why I planted so much. I need to have my husband listen to this segment of the show so we can remind him why our kitchen counter is full of tomatoes. And it was just, logical thought. Anyway, all right. So that's one lesson I learned, is really make notes year to year. That's my number one tip, because I remember last year, now I remember thinking, oh, you know what? I don't need 2 big rainbow plants. I just need 1, because it sets off enough slicers and they last almost a week and a half, 2 weeks each one. And if you're picking 4 or 5 or 6, every couple days, my goodness, then that's plenty for a family of 4. With one of my daughters doesn't even eat tomatoes. So, you just don't need that many. So make notes year to year and really assess, am I planting this just because it's a cool, funky, fun vegetable? Guilty as charged in many cases. Or am I planting this because my family's actually going to eat it and we're not going to have too much excess? So really make notes year to year. And believe me, I've done that. Next year, I'm going to pare it way, way down. I'm going to do 6 sauce tomatoes, like I said. And out of those 6, I'm going to have 4 San Marzano plants and 2 Goldman Italian American. That's what it's called. Goldman Italian American. I'm going to do a post on Gardening Utah about that tomato, because let me tell you, it is, and I know my sauce tomatoes, it is the best I've ever tried flavor-wise for a canned tomato when you're doing sauce. And when I say sauce, what I mean is you're cooking the tomato in the pot, you're getting it cooked down just a little bit, and you're putting it through a mill to get the seeds and the skins off. And then you're putting it back and cooking it down a little bit, and then you're water pressure canning the tomato. That's what I mean by tomato sauce. Something that you would actually then, if a recipe called for a 28-ounce can of tomato sauce, that's what you're using, is a quart of that. So anyway, Goldman Italian American, huge fan. I'm planning 2 next year and 4 San Marzanos. I'm doing just 2 or 3 slicers, maybe 2 cherries, because I have so many cherries. But newsflash, what I also will say is, believe it or not, cherry tomatoes make a deliciously sweet and flavorful tomato sauce. Trust me, because I've had bushels and bushels and bushels of them that I'm going, I don't know what to do with all these, and I can't waste it. So I've made sauce from them and putting those through the food mill. Lots of seeds and skins come out, but let me tell you, the flavor is incredible. So little heads up on that. So making notes is, it's huge. Look at what your family's eating. And right now, make notes on, if you listened to earlier in the show when I talked about these spring bulbs, make a note where you planted them, because trust me, you're going to forget. I do it all the time. It's like, okay, I'm going to put my daffodils here. I'm going to put some crocus around the front. Then I'm going to put some tulips over here. And then you get excited for spring and you go planting, or even later on in the fall, you go to plant something and you just dug up some of your daffodils. So make notes, if not, little garden markings and stuff. So that's those are some of the lessons I've learned so far here in 2020. And like I said, I could talk for hours on the lessons I've learned. But what I really want to know is, what lessons have you learned? I will bring some of those up next week in the Gardening Utah episode. So send me a message at Gardening Utah on Instagram, or find our Facebook page, Gardening Utah, and say, hey, Jana, here are some of the lessons I learned in 2020. And I will bring those up in next week's episode. How does that sound? Speaking of next week, new episodes of Gardening Utah drop every single week, and we air on 8:60 a.m. KKAT, Saturday and Sunday at 10 a.m. Thank you so much for listening to the show. I would absolutely love it if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. And also, just hit that 5-star button, would ya? That'll help us get found. That'll help us in search rankings, so that other gardeners like you that want to listen to our show and learn can have an easier way of finding us. So thank you so much to our producer, Lambo, and thanks to you for listening. We'll see you next week here on Gardening Utah. And remember, grow big or go home.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast. Gardening Utah. Available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.
We are supported by ProgressivePlant.com, the perfect and unique plants that will thrive in your locations. Let Progressive Plants help you today. Just go to ProgressivePlant.com and check out their wide selection. You can also go to the Design tab and look at the expert designers that they have that can help you plan your perfect yard. Visit ProgressivePlants.com today.